Good morning and welcome to the pre-proposal conference for the Human Research Program Solicitation, Appendix C. The title of our topic is Countermeasures for Mitigation of Spaceflight-Associated Neuroocular Syndrome, which we used to call VIP. Next slide, please. So what we're doing today is giving you more information and soliciting questions that you might have about this proposal. It's intended to clarify the quality of the responsiveness. It's an opportunity for us to interact. It allows everyone to get on the same playing field and get a feel for what we're actually looking for. If it might not be clear from the way it was written, you can never write everything so that everyone understands every single little point, and there's always some nuance. So this is the opportunity to ask questions. The pre-proposal conference is open to all. That's the intent, to get everyone on the same page, and that's what we would like to do. All questions and answers discussed here will be accessible to all attendees. There's nothing like off the books or sidebar unless that's just here, and you might hear that where a question is asked and we need to confer amongst ourselves to make sure we give you the absolute best answer. So you might hear silence for a moment or two, but that's us conferring to make sure we give you the best possible answer. Other than that, there's nothing off the record. Everything is on the record. The presentation and the Q&A are posted on the NSPIRE's website, which is given to you here on this slide. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the Human Research Program. That first bullet is critically important. The Human Research Program focuses on applied research. We are not NIH in space. We're very focused. We're very directed. We perform the research necessary to understand and reduce spaceflight human health and performance risks in support of exploration. It's quite specific. We have a list of risks that have been identified over the years, and that is what we use to guide our research. We also enable development of human spaceflight medical and human performance standards, whether that standard is something like allowable radiation or CO2 levels, those types of things. We help we help inform the generation of those standards with the medical operations folks. And then finally, we develop and validate technologies that serve to characterize and reduce medical risks associated with human spaceflight. And many of these technologies are things that you're familiar with here on Earth, but they need to be tweaked significantly in order to fly, whether they need to be miniaturized, hybridized, ruggedized. Any word that ends in "ized" that makes it easier to put on a space station is something we'll do. Keep in mind, we can't fly things like a 3 Tesla MRI. Think about it, it would collapse the space station. You know, there are lots of limitations on things we can do, and one of the purposes here today is to get those across to you and to allow you to ask questions on what those might be. Next slide. Here is our Exploring Space in Partnership slide where we show the different phases for what our intentions are. We're currently in phase 0, working on the International Space Station and using the space station as essentially an analog for exploration spaceflight. How do we get to Mars? How do we get to the moon? How do we do those things? We use the space station as a way to do that research. We're utilizing the space station now. Phase 1 would be to conduct missions in cislunar space, so the Deep Space Gateway that's on the books would be orbiting the moon, and we'll be using that as a platform. Phase 2, to complete the deep space transport and conduct Mars verification missions, which were most likely to be robotic. And then finally, phases 3 and 4 are going towards Mars, whether it's just for orbit or actual landing. You can see the time scale there in the 2030s. Next slide. So HRP, the Human Research Program, is broken up into elements. You can think of the elements almost like departments. And so here are our elements. Exploration medical capability. It is what it sounds like. Those are the folks who help generate the medical care for future missions. So think of medical operations looking forward. They do a lot of work on technology. They do a lot of work on standards. And they're one of our primary interfaces with medical operations. Human factors and behavioral performance. This is our element that looks at, like it says, behavioral performance, behavioral health, team interactions, things like that, as well as the human factors. How does the human interact with the vehicle? Human health countermeasures, that is really our physiology element. Think of a medical school and all of its departments. So you have all of those types of studies. You have neuro, you have cardio, you have nutritional biochemistry, all those types of things. Those largely fall under the purview of human health countermeasures. ISS medical projects is not in and of itself a science element. They are our implementation arm. They're the ones who will help you get your science on the space station and get it to function properly, meeting all of the requirements of doing experiments on the space station. And then finally, space radiation, just like it sounds. What does radiation do to the human, whether it's risk of cataracts, risk of cancer, or risks of degenerative issues, whether that's cardio or neuro? What does radiation do to the human body? That all is encompassed into that one element. HRP also funds the Translational Research Institute for Space Health. We call it TRISH, and that's through a cooperative agreement. So they offer independent research announcements, and they're really our high risk, high reward. There are folks going out there pushing the envelope, finding things that we may not consider here because we need to address our risk specifically. But we're thinking of them as our forward arm, really driving new and innovative research. Next slide. Generally, we do our research in many different platforms. What we're soliciting for today is encompassed here. So we do work on the International Space Station, obviously. Our radiation group does a lot of work at the NASA Space Radiation Laboratory. It's a unique environment where we can, in many ways, replicate the radiation, not only doses, but qualities and types that you would see in space. We have a bed rest facility we work with in Cologne, Germany. That's your bottom left, called NVHAB. That's a unique facility where we can also alter the atmosphere. So we can do high levels of carbon monoxide. We can do lots of different things there in conjunction with head-down tilt bed rest. And then we also have lots of isolation environments. The one pictured here, bottom right, is the Human Exploration Research Analog. We call it HERA. So that's a short duration research analog where we can study the effects of isolation on a small team. Typically, there are 4 individuals. Next slide. So, as I've mentioned, we're all about risk mitigation. There are lots of different ways that this happens. Here you see our 6 steps, and largely what you'll be involved with is steps 3 and 4. Identifying the research products required to fill our gaps. Our gaps, when we refer to gaps, that's our gaps in knowledge. Those are what lead to the experiments we need to do to answer our questions. And then generate research products, whether that's just knowledge that allows us to answer our questions better, or it could potentially be countermeasures where we can actually offer treatments or preventatives for some of the effects of spaceflight. Next slide. And here you see an incredibly complicated and difficult to read, but in many ways very useful slide. And so these are our risks. We call this our HRP integrated path to risk reduction. And just look at the colors as you would a stoplight, red, yellow, green. Red are the risks that have the highest potential for problems. So that's a high likelihood or a high consequence or both. Often it's both if you're red. So those are things that we spend more time worrying about. Yellow, again, is sort of in between. It's something that still requires mitigation or can be mitigated already, but still requires some work. Green is the lower likelihood by consequence, and generally is considered accepted at that point. Blue is optimized. So you can imagine if we have a countermeasure that works, but we're convinced there's a better way to do it, that could be something that could be moved to blue. And you'll see one blue up here on this chart under in-flight medical conditions, and it's there saying optimized medical system, where we could potentially get a blue. Next slide. So program constraints and goals, as you can imagine, we have constraints that aren't typical of other organizations, both on schedule, crew access, and our needs for risk mitigation, which are different from other government agencies. Both the space station and the analogs are limited resources. We only have so many subjects we can pull from. We operate under relatively low subject numbers compared to what some might imagine for clinical trials. When you're doing clinical trials, you're talking thousands, sometimes tens of thousands. What we're talking about is 12 or 20 or numbers that low. Because of that, your statistical analysis must be very strong. We recommend involvement of statisticians in the development of your proposals, because on the panels that will review the grant, we do have statisticians. So that's highly recommended from our standpoint. And then the final bullet here is one to bring home. Focuses on the human system risk reduction. Next slide, please. Here's a slide talking about our statistical considerations. I sort of summarized this already. You must have a robust statistical design. You need to be able to justify the number of subjects. You can't just say we're going to do 12 because you're going to give us 12. That is not sufficient. You need to justify how 12 will answer your question. Next slide, please. So here's a quick overview of the solicitation process. This is a two-step process. Step 1 proposals are to be submitted to NASA and should include a synopsis of the intended research. The Step 1s are due January 4th by 5 p.m. Eastern Time. There are no extensions unless there's a significant event that requires that, such as snowstorms or things like that. It has happened in the past, but we do not plan for that. So don't sit at home the night before hoping for that big snowstorm and get a snow day. We wouldn't count on that. The Step 1 proposals are reviewed for relevancy by NASA. Only proposers of Step 1 deemed to be relevant will be invited to submit a Step 2 proposal. Step 1 proposers will be notified of this decision by February 4th, 2019. Invited Step 2 proposals are due by April 4th, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We should be past snow days by then. Step 2 proposals will be reviewed for both merit and relevance. The merit peer review will be conducted by a panel of scientific and technical subject matter experts independent of NASA. And then NASA will evaluate the programmatic balance, feasibility, and cost of the proposals. The final award decisions will be announced by September 2019. Next slide, please. So here is our solicitation topic for today. Mechanisms and evaluation of countermeasures for mitigation of spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome, sometimes called SANS, which used to be called VIP, in a novel ground-based head-down tilt bed rest analog. So I mentioned the NBHAB facility in Cologne, Germany. This is the facility that this test will be conducted in. Next slide, please. So we have our element scientists here who can help answer questions. And at this time, we will open up the website for question and answer period. First question that we can see, are novel artificial gravity concepts accepted in this call? Peter.
Oh, sorry, I did the opposite of what I should. Thank you very much for this question. I have received many inquiries as to this particular issue, and let me formulate it this way. We are open to any suggestion, but in the solicitation it's indicated, one, we are not focusing primarily on mechanics countermeasures because we're already testing that as a directed study, but a unique mechanic countermeasure could be considered, but it's not the high priority. That's indicated in the solicitation. And if you consider 80 mechanical kind of countermeasure, it gives you the priority.
Thank you, Peter. Our next question from Karina. If we propose MRI measurements, are MRI costs something we should include in our budget, or is it included in the facility cost? Yeah.
We usually, this has been discussed every time we had a solicitation, so it's a good question. I think in the past we asked people to put in the cost of their own MRI, usually encountered expenses on this issue, and then we adjust accordingly according to our negotiations and interactions in behalf. I mean, so it just leave in what you usually put in the MRI.
It's important to note here that the NBHAB facility does have its own integrated MRI on site, so the subjects will not be removed and brought to a hospital. It's all part of that one facility. Next question, ADA. Do we have a sense on the number of subjects per arm, or is it still open and dependent on the power analysis?
Good question, and I think Steve did a very good job in hinting at what you should do. We have on purpose not defined the exact number of subjects because it will depend on, one, how many arms we're actually introducing into the study, and that depends again on how many proposals. But if you go back into the literature, you will see we always have between 8 and 12. At the AD says 8 times 3, because that could be justified statistically. Now, if you come up with a proposal where you need 25, it's very unlikely we can introduce 25 times 4 arms. So you have to kind of feel your way according to the literature, according to what we're already doing, and according to what we've described in solicitation. But a good rule of thumb is between 8 and 12 per arm.
Thank you, Peter.
And could I just emphasize, as Steve said, this is very important, and a lot of people haven't really paid attention to that yet. If you come up with a suggestion to use 9 subjects, it has to be justified with statistical power analysis. And let's anticipate that you wish to do a study whereby you need at least 50 subjects per arm. Then don't send a proposal because we'll never be able to implement that.
Thank you, Peter. Our next question is from Susie Zanello. Will standard measures be collected as part of this campaign? Yes, they will. Our standard set of bed rest standard measures, which are multilateral international standard measures, will be collected as part of this campaign. Our next question from Ashton. Do we need an IRB with the investigators involved, or will that be included in the proposal by HRP? These studies all must pass the German IRB because the study is being done in Germany with German subjects. So typically they could have an institutional review from the home institution of the investigator, and then they must go through the German IRB. Next question from Jason. Are the human test subjects provided, or should they be put in our budget? The subjects are provided by the German Space Agency, DLR, and that is through their own recruitment, and they are all German subjects, so they will be provided. Another question from Ashton. Can we propose additional complementary mouse experiments and in vitro experiments to further advance the hypothesis? I could defer to Peter, but I can easily say no, and that's written specifically in the call that we're not asking for that. Next question from Dan. What are the key metrics to measure the validity of SANS countermeasures? ICP via spinal tap? How valid are non-invasive measures of intracranial pressure, such as 2-depth transcranial Dopplers? Peter.
Yeah. That's actually, what are the key metrics to measure the validity of SANS countermeasures? Well, that's up to you and as the scientist to, in your proposal, indicate how you would do that if you suggest a countermeasure. It's not up to me to direct you to have a certain way of doing it. But if you look into the solicitation, we have in detail described our directed part of the study and what we're doing. There's also a list of experiments or experiments to be that we are doing. So, and also there's a lot of background material on our website. And if you send an email to me or Dr. Area, who is in our program science management office, we can supply you with publicly available information. ICP via spinal taps is unlikely to happen. You can suggest it and we can consider it, but you know, the ethical considerations surrounded about that. Then how valid are non-invasive measures of intracranial pressure? That's up to you to decide as the experts. I'm not an expert in that, except that we are doing on the space station CCFP and other measures. And we have investigators describing the accuracy of those measures and validity in papers that are already out.
Thanks, Peter. Next question from Karina. Can we include international co-investigators? Would they need to submit a separate proposal in their home country space agency for funding? Letty.
Sure. So yes, we can include international co-investigators. They would need to talk to their individual home country space agency for funding, but they must talk to them prior to the submission of the proposal. We will not accept any request for funding after the proposal has been received.
Thank you. Next question from Dan. What is the IRB acronym? That's the Institutional Review Board. That is our health and safety ethics review board that's required for all human research. I'll start that again. Yes, it is there, but as Peter said earlier, that is not a primary focus of this call. I don't know if you can modify it for testing. It is at least semi-configurable as far as blood pressure, heart rate, ultrasound, those types of things that are on each of the arms. I believe one of the arms has a LBNP integrated with it, and so there are some things that you can modify. If you want to change the radius, that's not going to happen.
They also, I just emphasize that we are already doing an 18 countermeasures testing study in the app. So you have to come up with a very unique approach in order for us to prioritize the proposal for selection.
Great, thank you. Next question from Stephanie. Does the radiology facility at NB have a real-time MRI available? Yes, there is a 3 Tesla MRI on site attached. You just wheel the subjects down the hallway and into the facility. They've been doing testing there for us for several years, so it has been vetted It has been used rather extensively, and we know that it works well. Next question from guest. Is there possibly a link or somewhere publicly available data on the current SANS countermeasures in place by NASA?
We recently put in right Manish the relevant publication for this from the data study, and everything else that's published is publicly available and what's in the solicitation.
Yep. So references are included in the call, so you should be able to look those up. From Stephanie Reel, could you expand on that? I'm not sure what you're asking. From Dr. Bucky, hey Dr. Bucky, how are you? Are you interested in proposals that incorporate numerical modeling? Peter?
That's a potential interest, but what we're looking for is actually a real hands-on experiment, but if you incorporate into that proposed numerical modeling, this would certainly be considered, yes.
Thank you. Next question from Afshin. What samples can we request from the subject serum plasma? Yes, we can do blood sampling, saliva, urine, fecal, tears, sweat. If I left something out, yeah, we could do skin scrapings for like microbiome type work. If I've left something out, ask a specific question, but generally we collect almost all liquid biomarkers. Stephanie, real time specifically for the MRI.
I'm sorry, I don't understand. What was meant?
Sheet is 100 frames per second.
Ooh, I do not know the specifications of the MRI. That is something that we can look up and then post when we post the answers online.
I would say that I would advise you to propose to come up with whatever requirements they have scientifically, and then we'll consider how to implement it.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Yeah. Tell us what you need.
We don't want the proposals to limit themselves right now in that particular aspect. If we can implement it, we'll do it. If not, we have to compromise and find out.
Okay, good. What will be the benchmark from Billy? The benchmark for what? Please expand upon that question. From ADA, does NASA have any interest in studying exercise and its impacts on SANS? Peter?
Yes.
Good answer. Okay, next. From Karina. Do we have to propose a countermeasure for Arm 4 of the study, or can we concentrate on SANS-related measures across the groups? Peter?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, from guests, how long is the open period for this solicitation, and are contact details for the TPOC provided? Yes, they're all available on the solicitation, and in the slides that we just presented earlier, it has all of the dates. Another question from Jason. How can we get information on the dimensions of the countermeasure rooms? Specifically, how tall are the ceilings? Again, I would echo Peter's answer to an earlier question. Tell us what your requirements are, and then we will figure out a way to meet them or to work with you on figuring out a way to do your study. So let's not limit ourselves here. More questions?
They're all very good questions. Very good. I'm impressed. Thank you.
General.
People are typing, but no questions are coming across. If there are more questions, please type them in. Here we go. Next question from Laszlo. Is there a standard technique at the moment to measure SANS at NASA? Peter.
Well, yes and no. It depends what variable you mentioned, because SANS consists of several changes in physiological variables. What we do is, Yael would like to explain that.
So right now, SANS is diagnosed via eye examinations, including fundoscopy and OCT, optical coherence tomography. Those are the main things that are used right now for diagnosis. But as we learn more about SANS, that may expand.
But I would say that, absolutely, but I would say that we don't now have standards for SANS. I mean, we're developing what the standard should be before you actually diagnose or have SANS. That's been revisited. But this is not the purpose of this call. This call is to find out scientific, field data for understanding the mechanisms of this syndrome, rather than going into operational definitions of SANS and standard measures.
Thank you. Next question from Action. Can the countermeasures being proposed be related to drug treatments? And if so, what if the treatment is not approved by the FDA?
The standards being proposed, yes, and maybe also nutritional supplements or things like that. And if so, I guess even has approved by FDA, right? Even it's been conducted in Germany, but I don't know.
If it's not an FDA approved medication, it has an extra level of approval required from the review board.
So it could be done.
It could be done, but it'll add an extra layer of complexity.
Yes.
So Jason asked the question, will there be 3 of the 30-day bed rest, 1 per year? There will be multiple multiple bed rest studies per calendar year.
Next question, if we need as many N as possible, does that mean 12 subjects and 6 would be control? So it's the maximum 6 possible results. Here I would say, give us your requirements, give us your power analysis. Don't lock yourself into a number. If your statistics requires 750, you might want to reconsider that. If it only requires 3, then great. But tell us what your requirements are, give us the statistics, and let us worry about how to fit those into the campaign and what numbers.
And we've had a lot of experience in working those issues, so please do not limit yourself.
Next question from Laszlo. Would you be interested in countermeasures in battling the headward fluid shift? Peter?
Yes, absolutely. But again, there might be other mechanisms.
Next question. How many time points can we request throughout the year? Request as many as you think are necessary to conduct your science. If they're not possible, when we get to the point where we integrate the science into the study, we will work with you to come to an acceptable number, but we're not going to limit you at this point. You tell us how many you need to do your science. Not 150. Next question from Philip. Will a copy of the PowerPoint presentation be available for download? Yes, it will. It will be available from the sites that were given earlier in this presentation. And then guest asked the same question, and I will give you the same answer. Yes, it will be available at the site that we gave you earlier in the presentation. Next question from Dr. Bucky. The Laurie et al. Study measured retinal thickness. Are there data on axial length, optic nerve sheet diameter available to Peter?
Yeah, I think, I think there are available data on the axial length and optic nerve sheet diameter. So I know that the team is working on further publications from that particular study. So this was not the only publication coming out of the label study. So I think yes, the answer is yes. It's not published yet, it's still proprietary data for the publication.
would those be available prior to the submission deadline for the proposals? No, they wouldn't. Next question from Stephanie, is the RT MRI technology, if the RT MRI technology is not available on site, and should it be relevant to the measures, is the lab willing to build and expand? No, they're not going to change their MRI facility for this. If you absolutely require a technology that's not there, what they'll do is they'll look beyond the facility. There are several large hospitals and there is a medical school in Cologne, and they can look for an acceptable facility. Of course, that would involve transportation of the subjects to that facility, but we've done that before. It's not that big a deal, and you should not let that impede your science. So if that is an absolute requirement, put that in your proposal, and then let us worry about how to do it. Next question from Jason. How can we connect with other study groups? We have a mechanical countermeasure that would match up well with behavioral psychology, isolation, and confinement via virtual reality. Open this up to the whole panel here. Anyone?
By contacting the medical, is that specific group, so you can call Dr. Williams.
There are also,
This week, can't really connect.
Okay.
can't connect, but we have previous isolation studies, results from isolation studies, which list PIs that typically are associated with NASA. So if you do a literature search on the types of isolation and confinement studies that you are interested in working with, then you can touch base with that particular PI.
But also in context with our at least physiological part of the program, you can allowed to call anybody of our lead scientists who may know about it.
Apparently, Peter, you need to speak louder.
You can, if you need connection to any physiological group, you are welcome to contact me or any of our lead scientists at NASA, and we will be able to indicate who's who and what specialists and what.
Thank you. Next question from Laszlo. How many subjects can the MVHAB fit, or how many can we prepare for? The MVHAB can hold 12 subjects simultaneously in one mission. And then, as you can see, we have multiple arms. So each arm would theoretically be up to, but not necessarily at 12 subjects. Peter, what is your last name? Norsk, N-O-R-S-K. His name will be attached to the solicitation, so all of his information will be available. From guest, I wasn't able to catch the slides or links from the earlier PowerPoint. Can we double back to those at the end of the Q&A?
We'll post them on the Inspire site.
Okay, Manish has told me that we will post those on the Inspire site. And I see that Ben is also typing now. He's probably answering the question as well. There we go. Excellent. Thank you, Ben. Any more questions for us? I don't see anyone typing out. There we go. Next question from guest. Are there any current studies that investigate the cellular mechanisms behind SANS? Yeah.
Yes, there are, and we have a lot of current studies. We have cell culture studies, and we are doing rat studies right now, where you look kind of into the cellular mechanism more or less, because you harvest the tissues and you look into all kind of biomarkers. And also, we've just selected mice studies, one mice study for ISS. We're actually also looking in, so the answer is yes. But the handicap is, of course, many of those studies are not published yet, so they're not publicly available. Yeah, the test book will give you what is being done, but there's no data.
And the evidence book will have.
The evidence book will have the evidence as of now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good thing, they could hear me.
Hmm. From guest Peter, is there a way I could possibly get some of those studies from you directly?
No, we have to wait until they're published, because it's like you, when you do an investigation, you wouldn't like to share the data before you interpret the data and publish it.
Any more questions?
Oh, yes,
A question from Jason. How is Sean enjoying his retirement? Actually, although he retired as a civil servant from NASA, he has 2 or 3 other jobs. So he's the scientist in residence at Space Center Houston, and that's been keeping him quite busy. And he's also scientist emeritus here, and he works 1 day a week from here. So technically he's retired, but in reality he's not really retired. But he is enjoying himself. John, you're working. Do we have any non-John Charles related questions left? Since we don't see anyone typing, oops, there's something from Ben. There we go. Excellent. Thank you, Ben. So there are the links for those who have asked. And the task book, so that's very helpful. Thank you, Ben. Seeing no other questions, we're going to wrap up our session now. When you go to the solicitation, it will have information and it will have contacts. I believe Peter is the primary contact listed. If you have additional questions,
Yeah, no,
you
Thomas,
can contact.
Thomas is as well as any.
Tom's also listed?
Yeah.
Okay, so both Peter and Tom are listed. If you have additional questions, you can contact them. Thank you very much. We appreciate your participation, and we wish you all the best of luck in writing your solicitation. Thank you.